humiliating yet startling thing if I just fired my hat at him. So I didn't tell anybody that.
Ron Howard is known as one of Hollywood's nicest directors, calm, patient, and deeply respected. But even someone as even-tempered as Howard has his limits. Over the years, he's worked with some of the biggest names in the business, and not all of those experiences were pleasant. Join us as we break down the 6 actors Ron Howard reportedly couldn't stand working with. Shelley Long. In 1982, Ron Howard was about to take the biggest leap of his young career. After years of being known as the wholesome red-haired kid from The Andy Griffith Show and the good-natured Richie Cunningham on Happy Days, he was finally stepping behind the camera for his first major studio film, Night Shift. It was a quirky comedy set in a morgue, starring Henry Winkler and a then-unknown Michael Keaton. For Howard, this was his make-or-break moment, a chance to prove he could direct for the big screen, not just television. At just 28 years old, he had everything to prove and everything to lose. Warner Brothers executives were watching closely, unsure whether the actor-turned-director could handle a feature film with a real budget and schedule. The cast and crew were talented but unpredictable. Winkler, Howard's old co-star from Happy Days, was the steady hand he could trust. Keaton was wild, creative, and constantly improvising, bringing a spark that Howard loved. But then there was Shelley Long, an actress with talent, confidence, and a very specific way of working. Long was on the rise at the time, known for her intelligence, energy, and sharp comedic timing. She hadn't yet become a household name through Cheers, but she carried herself like a seasoned professional. Her approach to acting was methodical. She prepared for every scene down to the smallest gesture, with every line analyzed and rehearsed. When she joined Night Shift, she entered a production where the tone was loose, spontaneous, and full of young energy. Howard wanted actors to play off each other, to find magic in the moment. Long wanted everything structured, precise, and clear. From the start, they were moving in opposite directions. The film's tone, offbeat and unpredictable, thrived on creative chaos. Howard's directing style reflected that. He encouraged actors to experiment, throw in new lines, or shift their tone mid-scene if it felt natural. But to Shelley Long, that looseness felt like disorganization. She wanted to know exactly where the camera would be, exactly what emotional beat she should hit, and exactly how the dialogue should sound. To her, Howard's calm flexibility looked like a lack of control. To him, her constant need for structure began to choke the flow of creativity he was trying to build on set. As filming went on, the clash between their styles became impossible to ignore. Long wanted each take to be rehearsed and polished. She would stop mid-scene to question blocking or challenge Howard's direction. She'd ask why her character would stand here instead of there, and why a line should be delivered with one tone instead of another. Every scene became a detailed discussion, and every discussion added minutes, then hours to the shooting day. Howard, still new to the politics of film directing, tried to accommodate her. He was patient, almost too patient, according to crew members who later spoke about the production. Some described Long as calculated, someone who wanted everything her way. Others said Howard was too accommodating, unwilling to put his foot down early enough. His collaborative nature, the same quality that would later define him as a beloved director, made it hard for him to confront her directly. To Howard, film directing was about harmony, getting everyone on the same page, building trust, and keeping the energy positive. But Long's constant questioning tested that philosophy. Michael Keaton and Henry Winkler thrived in Howard's flexible atmosphere. Their scenes often felt alive, funny, and unpredictable. Long, meanwhile, seemed frustrated by the lack of structure. She would request extra takes long after Howard felt he'd captured what he needed. The crew started to sense tension whenever she appeared on set. Howard handled it the only way he knew how, by staying calm and composed. He adjusted his approach scene by scene, working around her preferences rather than confronting them head-on. It was a learning experience, but not a pleasant one. Each day became a balancing act between keeping the set running smoothly and managing the growing creative friction with his lead actress. The conflict eventually came to a head during one of the film's most important scenes. Shelley Long, unhappy with the way her character's dialogue had been rewritten, refused to perform it as written. She believed the scene didn't fit her understanding of the role. What should have been a half-day shoot stretched into hours of debate. She asked for multiple script changes and insisted that the tone be shifted entirely. Crew members later recalled the tension. Lights cooling, cameras waiting, everyone watching as Howard tried to mediate without losing control. Ron Howard never yelled, never stormed off set. That wasn't his way. But those who were there said you could see the frustration in his face. He was quiet, but visibly strained, calculating how to keep the film moving without a full-blown confrontation. He listened, offered compromises, and slowly worked around her demands just to get the day's footage done. What should have been a smooth, funny moment in the movie turned into one of the longest and most draining days of his career. Coming up next, what happens when Howard faces not just tension, but total chaos on set with actor Tom Sizemore. Tom Sizemore. By the mid-1990s, Ron Howard had become one of Hollywood's most dependable directors. He was respected for his calm, organized sets and his ability to balance big studio expectations with strong storytelling. When he signed on to direct Ransom in 1996, everything about the project seemed perfect. The film had a tight, suspenseful script, a major studio behind it, and an A-list cast that included Mel Gibson and Rene Russo. It was the kind of high-stakes thriller that could easily win awards and cement Howard's reputation as a director who could handle intensity without losing control. But then came Tom Sizemore. Sizemore was cast in a key supporting role, bringing with him a reputation for raw talent and trouble. By then, he was known in Hollywood for his gritty, magnetic performances in films like Heat and Saving Private Ryan. He had the kind of intensity that made audiences lean forward, the kind that could turn a simple scene into something electric. Unfortunately, off-screen, he was also battling a growing list of personal demons. Stories of drug use, violent outbursts, and erratic behavior followed him everywhere. Howard, known for believing in professionalism and second chances, went into the project hoping to bring out Sizemore's best. He valued strong personalities as long as they respected the process. But from the start of Ransom, it was clear that Sizemore wasn't just unpredictable. He was a ticking problem that no amount of preparation could fully control. The production was already under pressure. The movie's complex kidnapping sequences required tight coordination and long shooting hours. Every delay costs time and money. On a Ron Howard set, that kind of disorder was rare. He liked structure, calm, and a sense of family among the cast and crew. But Sizemore's behavior disrupted that balance almost immediately. The first warning signs came early. Crew members noticed Sizemore arriving late more than once, sometimes looking tired or distracted. On other days, he showed up full of nervous energy, pacing and mumbling lines to himself. His performances were unpredictable, not in the creative, exciting way Howard encouraged, but in ways that made scenes uneven. Sometimes, Sizemore's delivery would be brilliant, sharp, focused, and alive. But just as often, he'd swing too far in another direction, giving takes that were off-tone or disconnected from the rest of the cast. Howard's preferred rhythm, smooth, steady, and focused, kept breaking apart. It wasn't just about acting. It was about the ripple effect. Crew schedules fell behind, co-stars grew frustrated, and the tension on set quietly grew. Renee Russo, known for her professionalism, tried to keep things steady. Mel Gibson, always intense but reliable, kept his focus on his own work. But the inconsistency in Sizemore's scenes made editing and continuity a nightmare. There were times when a shot had to be redone over and over because his energy didn't match the previous take. People who worked on the film later described it as a strange imbalance. Ron Howard was doing what he always did, keeping his composure, making adjustments, and trying to keep the production calm. But Sizemore's unpredictable energy was constantly throwing off that balance. Howard wasn't used to chaos. His directing style relied on trust and cooperation. With Sizemore, that foundation didn't exist. Howard's team tried to shield him from the worst of the disruptions, but even they couldn't contain the fallout. Some days, Sizemore's mood shifts were so severe that Howard had to completely rework the shooting plan just to keep things moving. What should have been a smooth, controlled production became a daily exercise in damage control. Ron Howard rarely speaks negatively about anyone, but in a 2004 interview, he gave a rare glimpse into what it was like to work with Sizemore. "There were days," he said, "I had to recalibrate everything around one person's unpredictability." It was an honest but understated comment that revealed a lot. Howard's use of the word recalibrate said it all. He was constantly adjusting, reshaping his direction, and rebuilding the day's plan just to accommodate one person's behavior. The production of Ransom was supposed to be a controlled, professional experience built on trust and rhythm. Instead, it turned into a test of endurance. Howard prided himself on being calm under pressure, but Sizemore's volatility pushed even his patience to the edge. Behind the scenes, the atmosphere was tense. Howard's polite, diplomatic style clashed with Sizemore's chaotic presence. For a man who valued respect and teamwork above all else, this was something close to a nightmare. It wasn't about ego or personal dislike. It was about maintaining order when one person's instability kept pulling the film toward disorder. People close to the production said Howard was determined not to lose his temper, no matter how bad things got. But there were moments when his calm cracked. Not in public, but in private, when he retreated to his trailer or production office. He wasn't angry so much as deeply frustrated. The predictability he built his career on had been replaced with constant uncertainty, and it showed him the limits of his famously patient temperament. The final breaking point reportedly came during a critical scene late in production. Sizemore's erratic behavior, possibly fueled by substances, made it impossible to continue shooting. His timing was off, his reactions didn't match the tone of the scene, and he seemed disconnected from the rest of the cast. After multiple failed takes, Howard finally made the rare decision to stop production entirely for the day. When Tom Sizemore passed away in 2023, tributes poured in from across Hollywood. But Ron Howard remained silent. He didn't release a statement or share any words publicly. It wasn't out of cruelty. It was simply consistent with his quiet, professional way of handling people who had once tested him beyond reason. Sometimes, silence says everything. Next up, how a childhood idol turned into one of Howard's most difficult early lessons. Andy Griffith. Andy Griffith. When The Andy Griffith Show premiered in 1960, it represented everything Americans wanted to believe about small-town life: warmth, simplicity, and decency. Sheriff Andy Taylor, played by Andy Griffith, was calm, wise, and endlessly patient. His young son, Opie Taylor, was played by 6-year-old Ronnie Howard, a red-haired boy with a natural charm and a clear love for acting. Together, they became the heart of the show, and to audiences across the country, they looked like a real father and son. Off-screen, the bond seemed just as strong. Ronnie admired Griffith deeply. As a child actor surrounded by adults, he found comfort in Griffith's attention and kindness. Griffith took time to teach him about timing, delivery, and staying calm on camera. He made sure Ronnie felt like more than a prop in the story. "Andy made me feel like I belonged," Howard said years later. "He never treated me like a kid who was just there to say lines. He treated me like a partner." For several years, that relationship stayed close and positive. Griffith was patient with his young co-star, and the two often shared jokes between takes. On camera, their chemistry made every scene feel natural. The show's easygoing tone reflected what Ronnie saw in Griffith during those early days. A mentor who balanced kindness with professionalism. To young Ron, it felt like he was learning from a man who really cared. But as the seasons went on and the success of The Andy Griffith Show grew, the atmosphere behind the scenes began to change. The warmth that defined Mayberry on television started to cool in real life. Fame can change even the most grounded people, and Andy Griffith was no exception. By the mid-1960s, the pressures of carrying one of television's biggest shows were starting to take a toll on him. Griffith wasn't just the star, he was the anchor for the entire cast and the tone of the series. As the years went on, his personality reportedly became more controlling and serious. Crew members and co-stars noticed the shift. He became moody, sometimes withdrawn, and occasionally sharp with others on set. Don Knotts, who played Barney Fife, remained deeply loyal to Griffith, but admitted privately that his friend could be unpredictable. Knotts adored him, but he also feared his temper. Frances Bavier, who played Aunt Bee, was less forgiving. She openly disliked Griffith and found him difficult to work with. For little Ronnie Howard, who was growing up before everyone's eyes, this change was confusing. He had idolized Griffith, but now he was seeing another side of him, a man who could turn from warm to cold in an instant. As the series entered its later seasons, the light-hearted family atmosphere was replaced by tension and fatigue. Scripts were getting tighter, schedules more demanding, and the responsibility of keeping the show's quality high fell heavily on Griffith's shoulders. Still, Howard stayed quiet. Even as a child, he was observant and professional. He did his job, learned from what he saw, and never complained. While others around him whispered about Griffith's changing moods, Ronnie simply paid attention. It was his first exposure to the complicated personalities that existed behind Hollywood's polished image. By the time Ronnie was a teenager, the dynamic between him and Griffith had shifted. He was no longer the shy, wide-eyed kid who followed directions without question. He was starting to think more deeply about his character, asking questions about motivation and story choices. For most directors and actors, this would have been a sign of growth. But to Griffith, who valued control and authority, it came across as defiance. Sources from the set later said Griffith didn't appreciate being challenged, even gently. He was used to being the leader, both on screen and off. When young Ron began showing his independence, their easy relationship began to strain. Griffith wasn't cruel or abusive, but there was an unmistakable tension whenever creative disagreements surfaced. Howard has never spoken badly about Griffith, but his later interviews hinted at this growing distance. In one from 1999, he said, "You learn early how to navigate dominant personalities, especially when someone can turn on charm for a take, then shut it down completely between scenes." It was a careful, diplomatic way of saying that working with Griffith taught him how to read a room, manage strong egos, and keep his emotions steady. For Howard, this experience was more than just a childhood memory. It was an early education in how to survive Hollywood. He learned that even people you admire can disappoint you, and that professionalism sometimes means staying calm when others don't. After The Andy Griffith Show ended in 1968, the two men went their separate ways. Howard moved on to other acting projects and later transitioned into directing. Griffith continued his television career, but rarely crossed paths with his former on-screen son. They remained polite and respectful whenever they saw each other, but the closeness they once shared never returned. Howard has described their relationship as cordial, not close. There were no public fights or bitter remarks, just a quiet distance that lasted for decades. When Griffith passed away in 2012, Howard's tribute was short and restrained. He called him a great teacher and storyteller and thanked him for the lessons he'd learned as a child actor. The statement was professional and gracious, but noticeably brief. It carried the same tone Howard had shown throughout his career: respectful but careful, honest but diplomatic. Next up, when Howard meets an actor whose intensity matches his patience in unexpected ways, Russell Crowe. Russell Crowe. When Ron Howard signed on to direct A Beautiful Mind in 2001, the project felt like a perfect match. It had a strong script, a powerful true story, and a leading actor known for bold choices. Russell Crowe had just come off huge successes and was respected for his total commitment to every role. The early mood around the film was bright. People talked about awards before cameras rolled. It looked like a dream team. Howard is known for order and steady leadership. He likes rehearsals, clear plans, and a calm set where the crew and cast move as one. Crowe is known for an intense, hands-on approach. He digs into character, questions everything, and refuses to let scenes slide by without purpose. At first, the mix sounded exciting, discipline meeting passion. But as production settled in, the gap between their methods started to show. Howard wanted a smooth process. Crowe wanted to keep pushing and digging. That difference shaped almost every day of the shoot. On set, Crowe asked questions about nearly everything. He didn't just ask about lines, he asked about why the camera was placed a certain way. He asked about the motivation behind each movement and each pause. He asked about the way a scene linked to the next. If something did not feel honest to him, he challenged it. This was not done to be difficult. It was his way of working. But it meant that simple scenes could turn into long discussions. For Howard, this meant shifting from directing to constant problem-solving. Instead of guiding the day's schedule, he found himself managing debates and keeping emotions cool. Assistant directors felt the strain too. They were used to Howard's rhythm, firm, organized, and predictable. With Crowe's intensity, that rhythm broke apart. The ADS had to reset the day over and over to keep things on track. Crews waited while ideas were tested, then tried again. The goal was always to serve the story, but the path to get there was harder than usual. People who watched the process said Howard stayed polite and professional, even when he was exhausted. He tried to protect the film's pace without shutting down Crowe's creative drive. He let Crowe fight for details and still worked to hold the production together. Some days, it looked like balancing on thin ice. You could feel the pressure on everyone from the camera team to the makeup trailer. Crowe's energy could lift a scene, but it could also drain the clock. Howard's job became to harness that fire without letting it burn through the day. Both men later spoke about their approach in ways that make the clash easy to understand. Crowe has been clear about his style. "I don't show up to be liked. I show up to find truth." For him, the work is about honesty on screen, and he will press until a moment feels right. Howard's take was calm but revealing. With some actors, you guide. With Russell, you hold on tight. He respected the power Crowe brought, but he also knew it demanded extra strength from the director's chair. This back and forth took a real toll. Emotionally, it meant long days and careful conversations. Creatively, it meant constant negotiation. Howard would plan a scene, discuss it with his team, then revisit it in response to Crow's concerns. Sometimes the scene got better. Other times, the time lost hurt the rest of the day. The point is not that one of them was right and the other wrong. It's that their methods pulled in different directions. The film benefited from both, but the process was not easy. What kept everyone going was the material. The story of John Nash needed sensitivity and focus. Crow's detailed choices helped build a layered performance. Howard's steady hand kept the story clear and emotionally grounded. The final cut shows both signatures. You can feel Crow's depth in each scene, and you can see Howard's structure in the way the story flows. Next up, the twist no one expected. How success on a hit sitcom still left Ron Howard feeling pushed aside by Henry Winkler. Henry Winkler. When Happy Days launched in 1974, the show was built around Ron Howard. He was the anchor. After growing up on The Andy Griffith Show, he was the familiar face meant to carry a warm, nostalgic sitcom about 1950s America. The concept was simple. Richie Cunningham, an earnest teenager, would guide the audience through high school, family life, and small-town adventures. The tone was wholesome and centered on Richie's point of view. That was the plan. Then Henry Winkler walked on as Arthur Fonzie Fonzarelli. At first, Fonzie was a supporting role. Cool, funny, leather jacket, motorcycle, a side character built to spice up Richie's world. But audiences latched onto him instantly. The cheers grew louder each week. Catchphrases spread. Suddenly, the image of the show shifted. What was supposed to be Richie's coming-of-age story became, week after week, a showcase for Fonzie's swagger and unexpected heart. Executives noticed. Writers noticed. The network noticed. The series' center of gravity moved, and it moved away from Howard. This wasn't because Howard failed. He hit every mark the show asked of him. The shift happened because television follows audience heat, and Winkler had it. As the Fonzie character grew, storylines bent toward him. Promotional materials featured him. Plot arcs rearranged themselves so the cool guy at the edge became the man in the middle. Season after season, the show's identity leaned so hard into Fonzie that Richie sometimes felt like he was orbiting him rather than the other way around. Howard liked Winkler. That's important. He has always praised Winkler as a generous co-star and a kind person. But he also felt the professional sting of being sidelined on his own show. That's just the truth of what happened. Industry chatter at the time captured the mood in blunt terms. The Richie Show became the Fonzie Show. For a young actor who had been positioned as the lead, it was a tough adjustment. Behind the scenes, this meant plenty of rewrites. Drafts came in with Fonzie's scenes expanded, jokes retooled for his rhythm, and emotional beats built to highlight his growth. Executive notes often asked for more Fonzie. Marketing leaned heavily on him. Press junkets shifted questions in his direction. Over time, Richie Cunningham's place in the narrative shrank. Howard did not lash out. He did not fight Winkler. He showed up, did the work, and stayed professional. But he felt the imbalance. Next up, the temperature rises on a movie set again, this time with Mel Gibson on Ransom. Mel Gibson. When Ron Howard took on Ransom in 1996, he was stepping into a serious, high-pressure thriller with one of the biggest stars in the world at the time, Mel Gibson. But this wasn't just any star. Gibson was fresh off Braveheart, where he had directed and starred, winning major awards and commanding a unique level of authority in Hollywood. He walked onto Ransom with creative power, both as a leading actor and as a proven director. That combination changed the normal order of a film set. The biggest challenge came from Gibson's active involvement in decisions that usually stay with the director and department heads. He weighed in on script changes, questioned blocking, and wanted to try different approaches to pacing and tone. None of this was random. Gibson came prepared and had clear ideas about what would make a scene land, but his constant input produced tension because it slowed the process and blurred lines of authority. People close to the production summed it up in a single line. Ron spent more time managing Mel's input than actually directing. That wasn't meant as an insult to either person. It was a candid picture of a set where the star's voice was loud and constant. Each day became a negotiation of what to cut, what to try, what to reshoot, and how to keep the schedule intact. The most intense example came during a major kidnapping sequence. The scene carried the movie's emotional weight and demanded tight coordination. Gibson wanted alternate angles, different beats in the performance, and a rethinking of how the tension rose and fell across the sequence. He paused filming multiple times to discuss approach and to argue for changes he believed would raise the stakes. Howard listened, pushed back when he needed to, and adjusted where he could. But the time lost was real, and the crew felt it. The day ran long, and the pressure tightened around everyone. Ron Howard rarely speaks sharply about anyone, and he didn't start here. He described the experience in careful terms that still told the truth. "Some actors bring so much passion it spills into everything," he said later. It was a diplomatic way of acknowledging that Gibson's intensity didn't stop at the edge of a scene. It reached into departments, plans, and the very rhythm of the shoot. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the hidden tensions behind Hollywood's biggest names, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more untold stories from the film industry.